Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, October 15th, 1946. When Loretta Caldwell first laid eyes on the woman who called herself Adelaide Brenneman, a chill ran through her, despite the radiator hissing full blast in the corner of Hartwell and Associates' legal office. The 44-year-old attorney couldn't explain the sensation. The woman looked ordinary enough. Gray wool coat with a fox fur collar slightly moth-eaten at the edges, navy felt hat with a drooping brim, worn leather pocketbook patched at the seams. Maybe 55, maybe 60, face weathered like old boot leather, hands calloused and cracked from decades of hard work. Pittsburgh had thousands like her, women who'd survived the Depression, sent sons to war, worked factory lines and laundry rooms, and kept families together through sheer, stubborn will. But her eyes... Those eyes were dead, like the taxidermied deer head mounted in her father's study back in Johnstown. Glass orbs that reflected light but held no spark of life behind them. "You're here about Matthias Brenneman's estate?" Loretta confirmed, adjusting the tortoiseshell combs holding back her graying dark curls. She'd worn her hair the same way since 1920, practical and professional. Those streaks of silver now outnumbered the brown. "I'm his sister," the woman said, producing a bundle of documents from her pocketbook with hands that trembled slightly. From age or nerves, Loretta couldn't tell. "Came up from Wheeling soon as I heard. Matthias passed 2 weeks ago. Just got the telegram yesterday. Took me all day on the bus to get here." Loretta examined the driver's license, holding it up to catch the light from the window. Adelaide Grace Brenneman, born March 15, 1891. Address listed as 1847 Market Street, Wheeling, West Virginia. The license was genuine. She'd seen enough forgeries to know. Clean, official stamps visible. Proper watermarking. Photograph matched the woman sitting across from her. Birth certificate looked legitimate too. Issued in Philadelphia County, Pennsylvania, March 15, 1891. Signed by a Dr. Harold Zimmerman who'd practiced in the city's factory district. Death certificate for the brother, Matthias Herman Brenneman. Notarized by Samuel Kowalski, dated October 3, 1946. "When did you last see your brother?" Loretta began filling out the inheritance petition form, fountain pen scratching across the heavy cream paper. "Must be 40 years now, maybe more." Adelaide folded her hands in her lap, the gesture oddly prim for someone with such work-worn fingers. "He worked the steel mills, moved around following jobs. You know how it was. Youngstown, then Aliquippa, finally settled here in Pittsburgh. I married back in '32, moved to Wheeling with my husband. Clarence worked the glass factories down there. We didn't write much, Christmas cards maybe. But he's blood, you understand. My only brother." "I do," Loretta noted the information in her precise script. Mr. Brenneman left a 2-bedroom apartment on Forbes Avenue, number 847, and savings bonds worth $8,000. No other heirs have come forward. "You're certain there's no one else?" "Nobody. Matthias never married, far as I know. No children. Our parents passed years ago, mother in the flu epidemic, father in '22 from a mill accident. It's just me now." She paused, pulling a handkerchief from her sleeve and dabbing at dry eyes. "I'm all that's left of the Brennemans. Simple case, standard procedure." Loretta had handled dozens of similar ones in 20 years of practice, longer if you counted the years she'd worked as a legal secretary before passing the bar in 1926, one of only 3 women in her class at the University of Pittsburgh Law School. Solitary men dying alone in rented rooms, distant relatives emerging from the woodwork, straightforward calculations of blood and property. She'd been practicing since 1926, building a reputation as one of Pittsburgh's most thorough estate attorneys, the kind lawyers called when they wanted every comma verified and every signature authenticated. Her senior partner, Theodore Garrett, a silver-haired veteran who'd practiced since before the Great War, always said, "In estate law, accuracy of documents and verification of kinship, that's what matters. Everything else is just procedure and patience." But somehow, right then, Loretta felt something was off. It was the same instinct that had served her well over 2 decades. the prickling at the base of her skull when a client's story had holes too neat, details too rehearsed. "Tell me about your brother," she asked, setting down her fountain pen and folding her hands on the desk blotter. "What kind of man was he?" Adelaide hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. "Well, quiet fellow. Serious type. Lived for his work, you know how some men are. Came home from the mills, ate his supper, read the newspaper, went to bed. Simple life." "What did he enjoy? Any hobbies? Did he follow the pirates? Join the union activities?" "The mills, the union meetings, I suppose. That sort of thing." The answer came too vague, too generic. No specific details, no personal anecdotes that would come naturally when discussing a sibling. Loretta nodded, but wrote in her notepad in shorthand, "Speaks in generalities, no real knowledge of deceased." Then asked, "What about childhood? You grew up together. Any memories that stand out?"
Childhood. The woman narrowed her eyes, as if trying to recall something distant and foggy. Father worked the shipyards in Philadelphia. Times were hard. You know how it was for working folks. We got by.
"When did your family move to Pittsburgh?"
A pause. Too long. The woman's fingers twitched against her pocketbook. "After the Great War," Adelaide finally said. "Father found work at the mills here. Jones and Laughlin, the big plant. We came in 1920, maybe 21. Stayed through the 20s, then the Depression hit and everything went to hell." She caught herself. "Pardon my language."
Loretta wrote that down too. Philadelphia shipyards, Pittsburgh mills, J&L Steel, arrived 1920 or 1921. The vagueness bothered her. Someone remembering their childhood should know the year they moved cities. That wasn't something you forgot. Something gnawed at her, a vague unease she couldn't name. She looked up at her visitor and met those dead eyes again, and felt that chill return. "All right, Mrs. Brenneman, I'll process the paperwork. You'll need to return in 1 week, next Tuesday, October 22nd at 2 o'clock. We'll request all necessary documentation from the relevant agencies, and if everything checks out, you'll be able to claim the inheritance within 6 months as Pennsylvania law requires." The woman nodded, gathered her papers with those trembling hands, and stood to leave. "Thank you, Miss Caldwell. I appreciate your help. It's been a difficult time." "Of course. My condolences on your loss." After the door closed, Loretta remained seated, staring at the frosted glass panel that read Hartwell and Associates, Attorneys at Law in reverse gold lettering. Something wasn't right. The woman knew the basic facts, names, dates, locations, but there was no warmth, no genuine grief, no personal connection to the man who was supposedly her only brother. Just those dead eyes and that rehearsed story. That evening, in her townhouse on Liberty Avenue, where she'd lived alone since her husband Robert's death from pneumonia in 1943, Loretta couldn't sleep. She sat in her study, still wearing her gray wool suit, Adelaide Brenneman's face floating before her eyes. The October wind rattled the windows. Leaves skittered across the cobblestones outside. She'd made tea but left it untouched, growing cold in the Wedgwood cup. Robert would have told her she was being paranoid. He'd always teased her about her suspicious mind, called her Detective Caldwell when she'd question inconsistencies in dinner party conversations. But Robert had been an architect, concerned with stress loads and foundation depths, not the small human lies that revealed larger truths. And Robert had been gone 3 years now. Something wasn't right. But what? Next morning, she arrived at the office before the secretary. Made coffee on the hot plate in the small kitchen. Waited for Theodore Garrett to arrive at his customary 8:30. "I've got a strange case," she said, sitting across from him in his walnut-paneled office. The morning sun slanted through the Venetian blinds, striping everything in light and shadow. The Brenneman estate. A sister showed up. Documents look clean, but I have a feeling... "Your feelings have served you well for 20 years, Garrett said, looking up from the briefs he'd been reviewing. He pulled off his reading glasses, let them dangle from the chain around his neck. What's bothering you specifically? The way she spoke about her brother. Too vague, like she didn't really know him. No personal details, no specific memories. Just generic statements about mills and unions. Loretta leaned forward. And her eyes, Theodore. Dead, like she wasn't really grieving at all. Dead eyes aren't evidence in court, Garrett said with a slight smile. But inconsistencies in testimony are. Did she contradict herself? Not exactly. Just vague. Too vague for someone discussing their only sibling. Then check the documents. Pull the records. You know the drill. He put his glasses back on. Trust your instincts, Loretta. They've caught plenty of frauds before. Remember the Kowalczyk case? She did. A supposed nephew who turned out to be a con man who read obituaries and targeted childless deceased. She'd caught him by verifying his mother's marriage certificate, which turned out not to exist. Loretta left his office with renewed determination. She spent the morning drafting formal requests to Philadelphia, to the Bureau of Vital Statistics, requesting confirmation of Adelaide Grace Brenneman's birth on March 15, 1891, and information about her parents, Herman Joseph Brenneman and Ruth May Brenneman. To the Motor Vehicle Division in Wheeling, requesting details on when Adelaide's driver's license was issued and what documentation she'd presented. To the Pittsburgh Department of Vital Statistics, requesting Matthias Brenneman's birth certificate and any records of his family. She mailed the requests with return postage, marked them urgent, and waited. Waiting was the hardest part of legal work. Theodore always said law was 90% paperwork and patience, 10% courtroom drama. Loretta had learned to occupy herself during the waiting periods, taking on other cases, reviewing contracts, attending bar association meetings. But the Brenneman case nagged at her. The response from Philadelphia came 2 weeks later, on October 29th. Loretta opened the envelope with trembling hands, standing right there at her desk rather than sitting down properly. Read it once, blinked, read it again, couldn't believe what she was seeing. According to archival records maintained by the Philadelphia County Bureau of Vital Statistics, Adelaide Grace Brenneman, born March 15, 1891, daughter of Herman Joseph Brenneman, born 1867, and Ruth May Patterson Brenneman, born 1869, died January 12, 1919, at Philadelphia General Hospital during the influenza epidemic. Cause of death: Spanish influenza with pneumonic complications. Buried at Laurel Hill Cemetery, Section 14, Plot 89, January 15, 1919. Death certificate on file, signed by Dr. Morton Phillips. Loretta reread the lines 3 times. Dead. Adelaide Brenneman had been dead since 1919, 27 years ago. She'd been 28 years old when she died, younger than Loretta was now. So who had walked into the office 2 weeks ago and used her name? Her heart pounded so hard her temples throbbed. She felt dizzy, gripped the edge of her desk to steady herself. This wasn't just fraud. This was identity theft on a grand scale, maintained for how long? The driver's license had been issued in Wheeling. When? Loretta grabbed the telephone receiver, asked the operator to connect her to Theodore Garrett's extension. He answered on the second ring. Theodore, I need you in my office, now. It's the Brenneman case. He arrived within 2 minutes, saw her face, and closed the door behind him. What did you find? She handed him the letter from Philadelphia, watched his expression shift from curiosity to shock to grim determination. Good God, he said quietly. Someone's been using a dead woman's identity. For how long? I don't know yet. I'm waiting for the Wheeling DMV response. But Theodore, this means the woman who came in here is a complete fraud. And if she's willing to steal a dead woman's identity, what else is she willing to do? The brother, Theodore said slowly. Matthias. How did he really die? They looked at each other, the same terrible thought occurring to both. I need to see that death certificate again, Loretta said, and I need to talk to the coroner. Carefully, Theodore warned. If this woman is dangerous, we don't want to tip our hand. Get the evidence first, then we go to the police. Loretta spent the rest of that day gathering information. She requested a copy of Matthias Brenneman's death certificate from the county. The one Adelaide had brought was a notarized copy, but Loretta wanted the original on file. She called the coroner's office, spoke to the assistant medical examiner, a doctor, Edmund Walsh, who'd been working there since before the war. Matthias Brenneman? Dr. Walsh sounded like he was checking files. Yes, we have the case. Died October 1st. Found by neighbors on October 4th when the smell became noticeable. Estimated time of death based on decomposition, approximately 3 days prior to discovery. Cause of death ruled as acute heart failure. No autopsy performed. Why no autopsy? No family requested it, no signs of foul play. Heart failure is common in men his age, especially mill workers. The physical strain, the heat, the long hours, it takes a toll. We see it all the time. Were there any unusual circumstances? Anything that seemed off? A pause. Why are you asking, Miss Caldwell? I'm handling his estate. A sister has come forward claiming inheritance, and I'm verifying all the details. Well, the neighbors mentioned a visitor came by about a week before his death. Woman, older, said she was a relative. Brought him some home-canned goods. But that's not unusual. People bring food to the elderly all the time. Home-canned goods. Loretta felt that chill again. Do you still have the body? Can it be exhumed? Exhumed? Miss Caldwell, that's a serious step. You'd need a court order, evidence of foul play, family permission. What if I told you the sister who came forward is using a dead woman's identity? That the real Adelaide Brenneman died in 1919? Silence on the line. Then, come to my office. Bring your evidence. Let's talk about this properly. Loretta spent the next hour organizing her documents. The Philadelphia death certificate for Adelaide, the notarized copy Adelaide had presented, the inheritance petition with the imposter's signature, her notes from the interview, documenting the vague responses and dead eyes. She met Dr. Walsh at 4 p.m. in his office at the county morgue, a gray stone building that smelled of formaldehyde and floor wax. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with wire-rimmed glasses and tired eyes. "Show me what you've got," he said. She laid it all out. He examined each document carefully, compared the dates, read her notes. "This is troubling," he said finally. "If this woman is an imposter, and she visited Matthias Brenneman a week before his death with home-canned goods?" He trailed off, but they both knew what he was thinking. "Can you exhume the body? Test for poison?" "It's been 6 weeks. The body was buried without proper embalming due to the October heat. We were short-staffed, lots of bodies coming through. It's going to be in poor condition." He thought for a moment. But certain poisons might still be detectable in bone or tissue samples. If I can get a court order for exhumation based on suspected homicide, I can do a full toxicology panel. What would you look for? Depends on the symptoms the neighbors described. Did he seem ill before death? Loretta realized she didn't know. I need to talk to the neighbors. Do that. Find out if he showed signs of poisoning, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, confusion. And I'll start the paperwork for exhumation pending your evidence. The Wheeling DMV response arrived the next day, October 30th. Driver's license for Adelaide Grace Brenneman was issued August 3, 1934 in Wheeling, West Virginia by Clerk Howard Stevens. Upon application, the applicant presented 1. Birth certificate issued in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, March 15, 1891. 2. Marriage certificate showing marriage to Clarence Hoffman on June 12, 1934. 3. Proof of residence at 1847 Market Street, Wheeling. Prior to marriage, applicant listed previous residence as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but no specific address given. License issued in married name was Brenneman Hoffman, later amended to Brenneman after applicant claimed widowhood in 1940. 1934. The imposter had been using Adelaide's identity since at least 1934. 12 years. But she'd lived in Pittsburgh before that. Maybe she'd known the real Adelaide, or somehow obtained her documents. Loretta made a decision. She needed to go deeper into Pittsburgh's records, find out who Adelaide Brenneman really was, who lived near her, who might have had access to her birth certificate after she died in Philadelphia. But wait, the record said Adelaide died in Philadelphia. But the family was from Pittsburgh originally? Or had they always been in Philadelphia? She requested Pittsburgh housing records from the 1910s and 1920s, searched for the Brenneman family, Herman Joseph, Ruth May, their children Matthias and Adelaide. The records arrived from the Pittsburgh Housing Authority 3 days later, November 2nd. Found them. Smallman Street, Building 412, Apartment 3B. Tenement housing in the Strip District, near the mills and the river. 6 families crammed into a 3-story walk-up. The Brennemans had occupied 2 rooms on the 2nd floor. Herman Joseph Brenneman, listed as head of household, employed at Jones & Laughlin Steel Company. Wife, Ruth May. Occupation, laundress. Children, Matthias Herman, born 1890, and Adelaide Grace, born 1891. The record showed the family living at that address from 1905 through 1918. Then a notation. Relocated to Philadelphia September 1918 due to employment opportunity at Hog Island Shipyard war effort. Returned to Pittsburgh June 1919. But they didn't all return. Ruth May Brenneman died in Philadelphia October 28, 1918, from Spanish influenza. Adelaide Grace Brenneman died in Philadelphia January 12, 1919, also from influenza. Only Herman and Matthias came back to Pittsburgh. Herman died in 1922 from a workplace accident at J&L, crushed by a falling beam. Matthias lived alone after that, worked the mills until retirement, died October 1st, 1946. But who else had lived in that tenement building on Smallman Street? Loretta requested the complete resident roster for Building 412 from 1905 to 1920. The list came. 6 families. First floor, Apartment 1A, O'Malley family. Seamus O'Malley, dock worker. Wife Bridget, 4 children. Apartment 1B, Kowalczyk family. Jan and Bronislava, both elderly, retired. Second floor, Apartment 2A, Petronis family. Lithuanian immigrants, Antanas and Ona, newlyweds in 1905. Apartment 3B, Brenneman family. Herman, Ruth, Matthias, Adelaide. Third floor, Apartment 3A, Murphy family. Widower Cornelius Murphy and his adult son. Apartment 3B, Driscoll family. Patrick Driscoll, wife Maureen, and daughter Vera. Vera Driscoll. Loretta felt the chill again, stronger now. She checked the dates. Vera Driscoll, born April 2nd, 1891. Just 3 weeks after Adelaide Brenneman. They were the same age, lived in the same building, must have known each other. Loretta's hands shook as she requested information on Vera Driscoll. Birth certificate, school records, marriage records, death certificate, anything. The response came November 8th. Vera Driscoll appeared in Pittsburgh records until 1934. Born Pittsburgh, April 2nd, 1891, to Patrick Driscoll, stevedore, and Maureen Kelly Driscoll, seamstress. Attended public schools through 8th grade. Worked in a laundry from age 14. No marriage record. Last known address, Smallman Street, Building 412, Apartment 3B. Then, nothing. After 1934, Vera Driscoll vanished from all records. No death certificate, no marriage, no forwarding address, no employment records. Just gone. But in 1934, Adelaide Brenneman appeared in Wheeling with a brand new driver's license. Loretta felt sick. She knew what had happened. Vera Driscoll had stolen Adelaide Brenneman's identity. But how? And more importantly, why wait from 1919 to 1934? 15 years. She dug deeper into Vera Driscoll's history, found it in police records from 1933. Assault reported by Vera Driscoll, April 8, 1933. Alleged assault by neighbor, name withheld. Case dismissed May 1933 due to insufficient evidence and complainant's questionable character. Note: complainant is known in the neighborhood, works at Riverside Laundry, unmarried. Questionable character. The code phrase for a woman who'd been assaulted, but whom the police didn't believe because she wasn't married, wasn't wealthy, wasn't respectable enough. Then another record from Allegheny County Hospital. Admission: Vera Driscoll, March 15, 1934. Childbirth: live female infant, 4 pounds 2 ounces. Mother malnourished. Infant died March 18, 1934. Failure to thrive. Mother discharged March 20, 1934. The baby died. And 3 days after discharge from the hospital, Vera Driscoll disappeared from Pittsburgh. And 5 months later, Adelaide Brenneman got a driver's license in Wheeling, claiming to have recently married. Loretta pieced it together. Vera had been assaulted, became pregnant, had the baby, lost the baby. The shame, the gossip, the inability to find decent work afterward. So she fled. But she didn't flee as Vera Driscoll. She fled as Adelaide Brenneman. But how did she get Adelaide's birth certificate? The Brenneman family left for Philadelphia in 1918. Adelaide died there in January 1919. When did Herman and Matthias return to Pittsburgh? June 1919, the record said. What happened to Adelaide's possessions? Her documents? Loretta made an intuitive leap. When someone dies during an epidemic, especially far from home, families often have to leave belongings behind. Couldn't afford to ship them back. Sold what they could, abandoned the rest. If Adelaide had her birth certificate with her in Philadelphia, and the family couldn't or didn't bring it back. But that didn't explain how Vera got it 15 years later. Unless... Loretta requested records from the Philadelphia influenza epidemic. Where did the Brennemans live while working at the shipyard? Found it. Temporary workers' housing, South Philadelphia, near the shipyard. Shared housing, multiple families. And in the same housing complex, the Driscoll family. Patrick Driscoll also worked the shipyard. Maureen and Vera went with him. They were neighbors in Philadelphia, too. During the epidemic, what if Vera, seeing Adelaide die, seeing the chaos, the mass deaths, the families fleeing back to wherever they came from, what if she took Adelaide's birth certificate? Kept it as insurance, as an escape route, just in case she ever needed to become someone else. And 15 years later, she did. But this was all speculation. Loretta needed proof. She needed to connect Vera Driscoll to the woman calling herself Adelaide Brenneman. And she needed to prove that woman had murdered Matthias. She went to Matthias's last address, Forbes Avenue, apartment 847, a 5-story brick building, modest, clean. The landlord, a Mr. Piotrowski, remembered Matthias. Quiet man, paid rent on time, kept to himself. Worked at the mill for 40 years until they pensioned him off. Never had visitors until that last week. Mr. Piotrowski shook his head. Shame how he went. Found him myself when the smell got bad. Had to call the police. You said he had a visitor that last week? Yeah, a woman. Older lady. Said she was family. Brought him some jars of food, stayed maybe an hour. I saw her leaving, said hello. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes, you know. Cold woman. Can you describe her? Gray coat, hat, maybe mid-50s, maybe older. Walked with a slight hunch, like she'd worked bent over her whole life. Voice was rough, like a smoker. It fit the woman who'd come to Loretta's office. Did Matthias seem sick after her visit? Mr. Piotrowski thought about it. Now that you mention it, I saw him 2 days later, and he looked poorly. Said his stomach was bothering him, thought maybe he ate something bad. I told him to see a doctor, but you know how old bachelors are. Stubborn. Stomach trouble. That could be poison. Did he keep the jars she brought? Might still be in the apartment. Haven't cleaned it out yet. Most of his things are still there. I was waiting to see if any family claimed them. Can I see the apartment? Mr. Piotrowski hesitated. Are you family? I'm handling his estate. A woman claiming to be his sister has filed for inheritance, but I have reason to believe she may not be who she says she is. That got his attention. You think she killed him? I think it's possible, which is why I need to see if those jars are still there. He unlocked apartment 847. It smelled stale, windows closed for 6 weeks. Matthias's few possessions remained: a narrow bed, a table and chair, a radio, some books, clothes hanging in the closet. Humble life of a mill worker pensioner. In the small kitchen area, Loretta found them. 2 ball mason jars in the cupboard, washed clean but still there. One had held strawberry preserves based on the faint red staining. The other had held something darker, pickle relish or mushrooms, hard to tell. Can I take these? Loretta asked. If you think they're evidence, sure. She wrapped them carefully in newspaper, carried them like explosive devices, took them straight to Dr. Walsh at the coroner's office. Can you test these for poison? She asked. He examined them under a magnifying glass. There's residue, not much, but some. I can run tests. He looked at her. You really think she poisoned him? I think she's a woman who's been living under a false identity since 1934, and I think she killed Matthias Brenneman to inherit his estate. Yes, I think she poisoned him. Give me 3 days. I'll test for the common poisons: arsenic, strychnine, cyanide. If it's something more exotic, it might take longer. While waiting, Loretta went to the neighbors on Forbes Avenue, knocked on doors, asked about Matthias, about his visitor. Mrs. Gladys Hoffman in apartment 846 remembered more details. I was coming home from market when I saw her leaving Matthias's place. She was carrying those jars. I remember thinking how nice, someone bringing him homemade food. He was always so alone. We chatted briefly. She said she was his cousin's daughter, trying to reconnect family. Seemed harmless enough. What exactly did she say? That her mother had been Matthias's sister Adelaide, and she wanted to meet her uncle before it was too late. He was getting up in years, you know. Mrs. Hoffman frowned. But thinking about it now, she looked older than you'd expect for a daughter. More like she'd be the sister herself. Did you see her face clearly? Not very. She kept her hat brim low, but I remember her hands, rough like a washerwoman's, and her voice was cold. When she smiled at me, it was just her mouth moving. Her eyes stayed dead. Dead eyes, just like Loretta had seen. Would you testify to this if needed? Testify? You mean in court? Mrs. Hoffman looked alarmed. Possibly. I believe this woman may have harmed Matthias. Mrs. Hoffman paled. Oh, my Lord. And I saw her leave. I might have stopped her if I'd known. You couldn't have known. But you can help now by telling the truth about what you saw. Dr. Walsh called on November 11th. You need to come to my office. I found something. Loretta arrived within 30 minutes. Dr. Walsh looked grim. Amatoxin, he said, showing her the test results. From Amanita phalloides, death cap mushrooms. Found significant residue in both jars. This is a sophisticated poison. Causes liver and kidney failure that mimics natural disease. Symptoms usually start 6 to 12 hours after ingestion: nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps. Then there's a latency period where the victim feels better. Then, 3 to 7 days later, organ failure and death. How would someone get death cap mushrooms? They grow wild in some areas, but they're not common in Pennsylvania. You'd have to know what you're looking for. They look similar to edible mushrooms to the untrained eye, but experienced foragers know the difference. Someone would have to deliberately collect them, preserve them, probably in vinegar or brine to maintain potency, and then feed them to the victim. Can this be accidental? Not a chance. The amount of amatoxin in these jars was concentrated. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Can you prove Matthias died from this? If we exhume the body, yes. Amatoxin accumulates in liver and kidney tissue. Even after 6 weeks of decomposition, we should be able to detect it. Loretta felt sick and triumphant at the same time. I'll get a court order for exhumation. She went to Judge Walter Morrison, a stern man who'd been on the bench since before the war. Presented all her evidence, the false identity, the suspicious visitor, the poisoned jars, Dr. Walsh's preliminary findings. Judge Morrison read through everything carefully. This is serious, Miss Caldwell. You're accusing someone of murder based on identity fraud and circumstantial evidence. Yes, Your Honor, but the evidence is compelling. A woman using a dead person's identity, visiting a man who then died of apparent heart failure, leaving behind jars containing deadly poison. If we exhume Matthias Brenneman and find amatoxin in his system, we'll have proof of murder. He signed the order. Proceed with the exhumation. But Miss Caldwell, be careful. If this woman killed once, she may kill again. The exhumation occurred December 3, 1946, a Tuesday morning cold enough to see your breath. Loretta stood in Allegheny Cemetery, watching cemetery workers dig up Matthias Brenneman's grave. The ground was half frozen, made the work slow. Dr. Walsh supervised, along with Detective Lieutenant Frank Kowalski from the Pittsburgh Police Department, who'd been brought in once Loretta presented her evidence. Detective Kowalski was a big man, former Marine, with a skeptical expression. You really think we're going to find poison in a 6-week-old corpse? Dr. Walsh says it's possible. Dr. Walsh is an optimist. But Dr. Walsh proved right. The autopsy took most of the day. Dr. Walsh worked carefully, taking tissue samples from liver, kidneys, stomach lining, bone marrow. Sent them to the lab for analysis. Results came back December 6th. Significant levels of amatoxin in liver and kidney tissue, Dr. Walsh reported. Consistent with death cap mushroom poisoning occurring approximately 3 to 7 days before death. This was definitely murder. Detective Kowalski's skepticism vanished. All right, Miss Caldwell, you've convinced me. Now we need to find this woman and arrest her. But finding her proved difficult. The address in Wheeling, 1847 Market Street, was a boarding house. Loretta and Detective Kowalski drove down on December 10th, a cold, rainy day that made the narrow streets of Wheeling look even grimmer than usual. The boarding house was a 3-story frame building badly in need of paint. The landlady, Mrs. Yablonsky, a heavy-set Polish woman with suspicious eyes, confirmed. Adelaide Brenneman? Sure, she lives here. Room 14, 3rd floor. Been here about 12 years, maybe longer. Quiet tenant, pays on time, keeps to herself. Works at a dry goods store on Main Street. Is she here now? Detective Kowalski asked. Should be. Doesn't usually go out except for work. They climbed to the 3rd floor, knocked on room 14. No answer. Mrs. Yablonsky unlocked the door with her master key. The room was empty. Not just of person, of everything. Bed stripped, closet empty, dresser drawers pulled out and vacant. Just a note on the small table. Knew you'd figure it out eventually. Smart woman. But I'm gone now. Good luck finding me. Loretta felt rage and frustration bubble up. They'd been so close. But Detective Kowalski was thorough and methodical. He questioned all the boarders, the neighbors, the owner of the dry goods store. Found that Adelaide Brenneman had quit her job on December 9th, saying a family emergency called her away. Had been seen carrying a suitcase to the bus station that afternoon. The bus station clerk remembered her. Bought a ticket to Cleveland. Paid cash. Didn't give a name. Didn't have to for a bus ticket. Detective Kowalski sent telegrams to Cleveland police, provided a description. White female, approximately 55 to 60 years old, 5'4", gray hair, weathered face, walks with slight hunch, maybe using the names Adelaide Brenneman, Vera Driscoll, or Dorothy Clark. Cleveland police found her 3 days later, December 15th. She'd gotten work at a garment factory under the name Dorothy Clark, the same name from the letter to Matthias. Was renting a room in a boarding house on the east side, living quietly, sewing piecework for 50 cents an hour. They arrested her at the factory. She didn't resist, just looked at the officers with those dead eyes and said, "Took you long enough." Extradited back to Pittsburgh, formally charged with first-degree murder of Matthias Brenneman, fraud, and identity theft. The trial began March 17, 1947. Loretta attended every day of the 2-week trial, sitting in the gallery in the Allegheny County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed. Murder trials always drew crowds, especially ones involving a woman defendant. Vera Driscoll, the court used her real name throughout, sat at the defense table in a plain gray dress, hands folded, face expressionless. Those dead eyes stared straight ahead, never showing fear or remorse or even interest. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Harold Fleming, presented the case methodically. Called Dr. Walsh to testify about the amatoxin found in Matthias's body and in the jars. Called Mrs. Hoffman to testify about the visitor with the cold eyes. Called the landlord about Matthias's sudden illness. Called handwriting experts who compared the signature on the inheritance petition to samples of Vera Driscoll's writing from her laundry employment records. A match. Called Loretta herself to testify about the investigation, the discovery of Adelaide Brenneman's real death certificate, the trail of evidence leading to Vera Driscoll. The defense attorney, a young man named Robert Chen, who'd been assigned by the court, did his best. Argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that maybe Matthias had picked the mushrooms himself, mistaking them for edible ones. That maybe the jars had been contaminated accidentally. That maybe Adelaide Brenneman really was who she claimed to be, and the death certificate from Philadelphia was in error. But Loretta had been too thorough. Every argument had a counter-argument. Every alternative explanation collapsed under the weight of evidence. Then the defense made a mistake. They put Vera on the stand. She took the oath without expression, sat in the witness box with those dead eyes fixed on the prosecutor. "Miss Driscoll," Mr. Chen said gently, "did you kill Matthias Brenneman?" "No." "Did you ever meet Matthias Brenneman?" A pause, just long enough to be noticeable. "No." The prosecutor pounced during cross-examination. "You testified you never met Matthias Brenneman, but we have testimony from Mrs. Hoffman that she saw you leaving his apartment. How do you explain that?" "She's mistaken. Wasn't me. We have your handwriting on the inheritance petition, your fingerprints on the jars found in his apartment. How do you explain that?" "Someone must have forged my handwriting. I never touched those jars." "You're testifying under oath that you never went to Forbes Avenue, never visited Matthias Brenneman, never brought him home canned goods?" "That's right." "Then how do you explain the letter sent to Matthias from Wheeling, postmarked September 20th, signed by Dorothy Brenneman Clark, written in your handwriting, from the boarding house where you lived?" Vera's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. "I don't know anything about that." The prosecutor then introduced another piece of evidence, one Loretta had found in her deepening investigation. "Miss Driscoll, isn't it true you've been married 4 times?" Defense Attorney Chen objected. "Relevance, Your Honor?" Judge Morrison considered. "I'll allow it. The prosecution may proceed." The prosecutor continued. "First marriage, to Boris Kowalski, 1936. He died in 1940 from an industrial accident. You inherited his pension. Second marriage, to Eli Hoffman, 1941. He died in 1943 from sudden heart failure. You inherited his savings. Third marriage, to Gerald Novak, 1943. He died in 1945 in a mining accident. You inherited his life insurance. Is that correct?" Vera said nothing. "Answer the question, Miss Driscoll. Those were my husbands. They died in accidents. I didn't kill them." "Let's examine these accidents more closely. The prosecutor produced police reports, witness statements, medical records. Loretta had provided all of it. Weeks of additional investigation. Boris Kowalski. Workers testified he'd complained about a loose safety railing for weeks before it gave way, sending him into machinery. His brother testified that Vera had visited the factory the day before the accident, bringing Boris lunch. She'd been seen near the machinery, alone. Eli Hoffman. Medical records showed he'd been healthy before sudden heart failure. But his sister had kept some of Vera's home remedies. Tested by Dr. Walsh, they contained foxglove, digitalis, a cardiac poison that, in small doses over time, causes irregular heartbeat and eventual heart failure that appears natural. Gerald Novak. The mining accident, a tunnel collapse from loosened support beams. The foreman dismissed it as poor maintenance. But Gerald's shift partner testified that Vera had visited the mine a week before, asking for a tour, wanting to see where her husband worked. She'd been alone near the equipment shed for several minutes. 3 husbands, 3 suspicious deaths, 3 inheritances, the prosecutor said. And now Matthias Brenneman, not a husband, but a victim nonetheless. Do you see a pattern, Miss Driscoll? Vera's lawyer objected strenuously, but the damage was done. The jury had heard it. Then came the question of identity. The prosecutor introduced the Philadelphia death certificate for Adelaide Brenneman, showed that Vera had stolen a dead girl's identity and used it for 12 years. Why did you take Adelaide Brenneman's name? The prosecutor asked. Vera finally showed emotion, a flash of anger in those dead eyes. Because Vera Driscoll was nothing. A laundry worker assaulted by her boss, pregnant out of wedlock, shamed and cast out. Adelaide Brenneman could be someone else. Someone respectable. So you stole her life. She was dead. She wasn't using it. And Matthias? He was Adelaide's real brother. He could have exposed you. So you killed him before he could. I didn't kill anyone. For the first time, Vera's voice rose. They all deserved what they got. Boris beat his first wife half to death. Eli molested his students and got away with it because his father was on the school board. Gerald turned in his neighbors during the Red Scare for political points, got innocent people deported. Matthias abandoned his pregnant wife and baby in 1915, let them die in poverty while he worked the mills in Ohio. They were all guilty. I just gave them what they had coming. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison gavelled for order. Defense attorney Chen looked stricken. His client had just confessed. The prosecutor let the moment hang. Then, quietly, so you did kill them. Vera seemed to deflate. Yes, all of them, and I'd do it again. The trial ended the next day. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 4 counts of first-degree murder, 4 counts of fraud, 1 count of identity theft. Sentencing occurred a week later, March 31, 1947. Judge Morrison, a stern man not given to speeches, made an exception. Vera Driscoll, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of 4 premeditated murders committed over 9 years. You have stolen the identity of a deceased person and used it to commit fraud and murder. You have shown no remorse, no conscience, no recognition of the enormity of your crimes. While the court recognizes that you suffered hardships in your early life, poverty, illness, assault, millions of Americans suffered similarly during the Depression and the epidemic without turning to murder. Your suffering does not excuse your crimes. This court sentences you to death by electrocution. May God have mercy on your soul. Pennsylvania had executed criminals regularly throughout its history, though women were rarely sentenced to death. Vera Driscoll would be one of only a handful of women to face the electric chair in the state's history. Her attorney filed appeals immediately, argued that the evidence regarding the earlier husbands should have been excluded, that combining multiple cases violated due process, that Vera's confession had been coerced by aggressive prosecution. The appeals dragged on for 18 months. Multiple levels of courts reviewed the case. Each time, the conviction was upheld. Final execution date set, November 14th, 1948. But before that date, Loretta did something she knew she'd regret but couldn't stop herself from doing. She visited Vera in Allegheny County Jail. It was October 25th, 1948, 3 weeks before the execution. Loretta told the matron she was there on legal business, though that was a lie. She had no legal reason to visit. She just needed to understand. The matron led her to a small visiting room. Concrete walls, a single barred window, a table bolted to the floor with chairs on either side. Vera was brought in wearing a gray prison dress, hands cuffed in front of her. She'd lost weight since the trial. Her hair had gone completely gray. But those eyes, still dead. "Miss Caldwell," Vera said as the matron removed her cuffs, "I wondered if you'd come." They sat across from each other, wire mesh between them. "Why did you do it?" Loretta asked. No preamble, no small talk. "I read your life story. I know you suffered. But why murder?" Vera was quiet for a long time, stared at her hands, calloused and scarred from decades of hard labor. Finally, "You ever been hungry? Really hungry? Not, I missed lunch hungry. I haven't eaten in 3 days and my stomach is eating itself hungry." Loretta shook her head. She'd grown up middle class in Johnstown, daughter of a bank manager. The Depression had been hard, but they'd never starved. "I was 16 when my father lost his job," Vera said. 1907. The panic, they called it. Banks failing, businesses closing, men jumping out of windows. My father couldn't find work for 2 years. We ate garbage. Literally went through trash bins behind restaurants, fought with stray dogs for scraps. My mother got consumption, tuberculosis, coughing blood, wasting away. We couldn't afford a doctor. She died in our apartment while I held her hand. I was 19 years old. Then my father got work at the shipyard in Philadelphia when the war started. We moved there in 1918. Things were better for 6 months. Then the flu came. October 1918. Father died the first week. I got sick but survived. Came home from the hospital to find our landlord had sold all our possessions to cover back rent. I was 27 years old, alone in Philadelphia with nothing. Went back to Pittsburgh. Got work at Riverside Laundry. 12-hour days, 6 days a week, hands raw from lye and hot water. Made $11 a week. Paid $8 for a room, $3 for food. No money for decent clothes or medicine or anything. The foreman, she paused, jaw tight. He forced himself on me in the storage room after closing one night in April 1933. Told me if I reported it, he'd say I'd invited it, and who would they believe? A respected foreman or a laundry worker? I got pregnant. Had the baby in a charity ward. Little girl, 4 pounds, weak from my malnutrition. Died 3 days later. Failure to thrive, they said. Fancy words for too poor to live. Vera looked up, and for the first time, Loretta saw something other than deadness in her eyes. A deep, burning anger. And everyone knew. The neighbors whispered. The women at church avoided me. I couldn't get other work. Questionable character, they said. I was 23 years old, marked for life because a man forced himself on me and the baby died. That's when I found Adelaide's birth certificate. I'd kept it since Philadelphia, found it in the trash after she died. Her father threw everything away, couldn't bear the memories. I'd kept it thinking maybe someday it would be useful. And it was. I became Adelaide Brenneman. Got a driver's license, moved to Wheeling, started over. Met Boris Kowalski, married him. For the first time in my life, I had security. A husband with a steady job, a decent apartment, enough food. Then I found out he'd had a first wife. Beat her so badly she lost hearing in one ear, then abandoned her and their kids when she finally left him. I was living off money that should have gone to support his children. He was a violent drunk who'd chosen me because I was desperate and wouldn't leave. So I fixed the problem. The loose railing at the factory. Everyone knew it needed repair. I just made sure it wasn't repaired. Loretta felt sick. You murdered him for convenience. I murdered him because he deserved it. And I took the pension because I'd earned it putting up with him. And the others? Eli Hoffman, charming teacher, everyone loved him, except the 3 girls he'd molested over the years. Everyone knew. No one did anything because his father was powerful. He married me thinking I'd be grateful, submissive. I gave him foxglove in his tea for a month. His heart gave out. Gerald Novak, union man, patriotic American, reported his neighbors for radical activities during the Red Scare. Got 2 families deported. 1 man killed himself. Married me for companionship. I loosened the bolts on the mine supports. Took 2 weeks before the collapse, but it happened. And Matthias? She smiled that dead smile. Matthias abandoned his pregnant wife in 1915, went to work mills in Ohio, sent her 1 letter saying he needed to find himself. She had the baby alone, died in childbirth because she couldn't afford a doctor. The baby died a week later. Matthias came back to Pittsburgh in 1920 like nothing happened. I researched them all before I acted. Every single one. Found their sins, their victims. I didn't kill innocent people. That wasn't your justice to give. Loretta's voice rose despite herself. You're not judge and jury. No? Who was? The law? Vera laughed bitterly. The law did nothing when I was assaulted. Did nothing when I starved. Did nothing when my baby died because I couldn't afford to feed her. The law protected the foreman who raped me, protected the men who beat their wives and molested children and turned in innocent people. The law protects the powerful. So I became powerful. I took what I needed from men who'd taken from others. I gave them justice the law wouldn't. You killed for money, Loretta said flatly. Yes, because I'd earned it through my suffering. The world owed me for what it took from me, my mother, my father, my baby, my reputation, my life. I collected that debt. Loretta stood. The world owed you nothing, and now you'll pay for what you've done. Vera smiled. Will I? I lived 12 years in comfort after a lifetime of misery. I had nice clothes, warm rooms, good food. I felt powerful instead of powerless. The electric chair will take 5 minutes. 5 minutes of pain for 12 years of comfort. That's a trade I'd make again. Loretta left without another word, walked out of the jail into the October afternoon, felt the cold air on her face, tried to wash away the conversation. But Vera's words stayed with her. Vera Driscoll was executed November 14, 1948, at Rockview Penitentiary. One of only 3 women executed in Pennsylvania in the 20th century. Loretta didn't attend. She was in court that day, handling a routine estate matter. But when she got home that evening, she sat in her study with a glass of whiskey, something she rarely did, and thought about Vera Driscoll. Had she won? Yes. Justice had been served. A serial killer was stopped. 4 murders proven, the killer executed. But it felt hollow. Because Vera had been right about one thing. The world was cruel. Poverty crushed people. The law didn't protect everyone equally. Sometimes victims became monsters. Loretta had stopped the monster, but she hadn't fixed the conditions that created the monster in the first place. That wasn't her job. Her job was law, not social reform. But still. She finished the whiskey, set the glass down, and went back to work. Because there were more cases waiting. More estates to settle, more frauds to catch, more legitimate heirs to protect. And that was what she could control. Years later, Pittsburgh, 1965. Loretta Caldwell is 63 years old now. Still practicing, still sharp, though she's turned over most of the daily work to younger partners. She comes into the office 3 days a week, handles consultation in complex cases, mentors new attorneys. On her desk is a new file. Wealthy widower died last month. A nephew appeared from out of state, claiming inheritance. The junior partner handling the case asked Loretta to review the documents. Something felt off. Loretta reads through the file carefully. Birth certificate shows the nephew was born in 1920. Death certificate for the supposed father shows he died in 1943 during the war, North Africa campaign. Service records provided show he was in the Army, 1st Armored Division. But the dates don't align. The death certificate says July 15, 1943. The service records say the division wasn't in combat until November 1943. Small discrepancy. Easy to miss. But Loretta doesn't miss details. She picks up the phone, calls the War Department, requests verification of the service record. Takes 3 weeks to get the response. The War Department has no record of a soldier by that name dying in North Africa in 1943. They have a record of a Thomas Callahan who deserted in 1942 and was dishonorably discharged. Different man? Or forged documents? Loretta digs deeper. Requests birth certificates, school records, employment history. The nephew's story falls apart under scrutiny. False father, fabricated service record, forged birth certificate. Another fraud. Another person trying to steal what isn't theirs. Loretta hands her evidence to the junior partner. File a motion to dismiss his claim. If he persists, we'll prosecute for fraud. The junior partner, a young woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to Vera's defense attorney, looks amazed. How did you catch this? Details, Loretta says. Always check the details. Dates, places, names. Fraudsters are usually good with the big picture, but sloppy with specifics. Is it always about money? Usually. Sometimes it's desperation, sometimes revenge, sometimes just greed. But it's always about taking something that doesn't belong to them. Patricia leaves, grateful and educated. Loretta returns to the file, makes notes, documents everything for the case file. Then she opens her desk drawer. Inside is a folder she's kept for 17 years, labeled Driscoll, Vera. She doesn't open it often. But sometimes, on days like this when she catches another fraud, she remembers. Inside are newspaper clippings from the trial, photos of Vera being led into the courthouse, dead eyes staring at nothing. The execution notice from November 15, 1948, and one letter, handwritten on prison stationery, delivered 2 days before the execution. Miss Caldwell, you won. I don't regret what I did. I lived the life I deserved after years of suffering. If I hadn't taken what I took, I would have died in poverty and anonymity. Instead, I'll be remembered. My story will be told. And you'll spend your life looking over your shoulder, wondering if the next client is another me. You'll see my face in every stranger. You'll question every document. You'll never fully trust again. That's my legacy to you. Not fear, vigilance. You'll be better at your job because of me. You'll save lives because you learn to recognize people like me. So in a way, I've made you who you are. You're welcome. Fee. D. Loretta had wanted to burn that letter when it arrived, but she kept it. Because Vera was right. She did question every document now. She did look for inconsistencies, check dates obsessively, verify everything twice. She never fully trusted a client's story without proof. And yes, she'd caught more frauds because of it. Saved more estates, protected more legitimate heirs. Vera Driscoll, trying to wound her, had instead made her better at her job. Loretta closes the folder, locks the drawer. Outside, Pittsburgh continues its evening routine. Workers heading home, shops closing, streetlights flickering on in the autumn dusk. Somewhere out there might be another Vera Driscoll, another patient predator with dead eyes and a stolen identity, waiting to strike. But they won't get past Loretta Caldwell, not while she's watching, not while she remembers, not while details matter. Epilogue, 1970. Loretta Caldwell retired from active practice in June 1970, age 68. She'd practiced law for 44 years, specializing in estate litigation and fraud prevention. Her retirement party at the Fort Pitt Hotel drew 200 people: judges, attorneys, clients, former adversaries. They toasted her career, her integrity, her dedication to justice. The managing partner of what was now Hartwell Caldwell and Associates presented her with a plaque. For 44 years of service to the law and to truth, your vigilance has saved countless lives and protected the inheritance rights of hundreds of families. In her brief speech, Loretta said, "I've been asked many times over the years what my most challenging case was. People expect me to name some complex litigation, some landmark precedent. But my answer is always the same: the Vera Driscoll case. Not because it was legally complex, it wasn't, but because it taught me that evil isn't always obvious. Sometimes it has reasons that almost make sense. Sometimes it wears the face of a victim. My job, our job as attorneys, is to look past the surface, to verify, to question, to check the details, because in those details lies the truth. I caught Vera Driscoll because I checked a birth certificate, such a small thing, but it unraveled a decade of murders. So my advice to all of you, especially the young attorneys: trust, but verify. Always verify. The life you save might not even know they were in danger." After the party, Loretta went home to her townhouse on Liberty Avenue, sat in her study surrounded by 44 years of case files and law books, thought about Vera Driscoll, thought about all the other frauds she'd caught over the years. 63 in total, she'd counted once. 63 people who tried to steal estates, forge wills, impersonate heirs. How many more had gotten away with it? How many Veras were out there, living under stolen names, collecting inheritances from people they'd murdered? She didn't know, couldn't know, but she'd done her part, stopped the ones she could, taught others to watch for the signs. That had to be enough. Final note, 1988. Loretta Caldwell passed away February 12, 1988, age 86, in her sleep at her home in Shadyside, where she'd moved after retirement. Her obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned her pioneering work as one of Pittsburgh's first female attorneys, her 44-year career specializing in estate law, her reputation for thoroughness and integrity. But it didn't mention the real legacy. In law schools across Pennsylvania, professors still teach the Driscoll Protocol, a comprehensive verification process for inheritance claims that Loretta developed after the Vera Driscoll case. It includes cross-referencing birth and death certificates across multiple jurisdictions, verification of family relationships through multiple sources, background checks on all claimants, interview protocols designed to catch inconsistencies, toxicology testing when death seems suspicious, systematic documentation of all evidence. Every estate attorney who uses this protocol prevents fraud. Every fraud prevented protects a legitimate heir from being displaced by an imposter. Every imposter caught prevents a possible murder. In the 60 years since Vera Driscoll's execution, the Driscoll Protocol has been credited with catching over 1,200 fraudulent inheritance claims across Pennsylvania alone. How many of those would have turned into murders? Unknown. But some certainly would have. That's Loretta Caldwell's real legacy. Not the courtroom victories or the precedents set, but the quiet, systematic work of verification that continues long after she's gone. Because she taught a generation of lawyers to look at the details, to question inconsistencies, to trust their instincts, to remember that every document tells a story, and some stories are lies, and that catching those lies, that's the work that matters. Day after day, case after case, detail after detail, until the predators are stopped and the innocent are protected. That was Loretta Caldwell's life, and in the grand accounting of justice, it was a life extraordinarily well lived. Because she looked into the dead eyes of a serial killer and didn't look away. because she followed the evidence wherever it led, because she remembered that the dead deserve justice and the living deserve protection, and because she refused to accept that the world owed anyone the right to kill. Vera Driscoll believed the world owed her, believed her suffering justified her crimes, believed she had the right to judge and execute. Loretta Caldwell proved her wrong. Not with philosophy or argument, but with evidence and law and unwavering commitment to truth. That's the ending. Simple, true, complete. One woman who believed she was owed everything, stopped by one woman who believed in verifying everything. And in that verification lies all the difference.